buy-in is so important, and without it, it feels so difficult, and that's what we're coming on to next. So it's, how can we get managers to apply? First of all, we need to get the buy-in, and we need to speak the language of those that make the decisions, and usually that's implications, return on investment. There needs to be a valid reason, not just a hunch. So it's not like presenting a hypothesis. You're making a claim, but you need to back it up with your research, because as you know, change takes time, it's energy, it's money, so we have to prove it. So this is coming on to like how you would sort of report data. I'm going to go through some of it fairly swift because I don't want to take your time too much, because I know it's coming up, but I know this is important. So what do you need to know, and what do they need to know? Now, these are what I call the big questions, and it's a starting point, and you have to start out somewhere. So starting out can be very abstract. It can just be very like blue sky thinking on a brainstorming, just general curiosity about the company. Like, what's the average learning hour per employee, per age group, per department? What department is the most proactive in terms of learning, and how do we even capture that? We'll come on to it. Do senior management upskill? And if not, why not? And if they do, what are they doing? What are they learning? How are they doing that? What are the intentions? Is there any coaching happening? What are our current offerings at the moment versus what's in demand right now? These big questions come up first. Then you start thinking, well, how am I supposed to answer those big questions? And that's when the data comes in. That's when you look at your quantitative data, so your metrics, but also your qualitative. So any like comments or focus groups or discussions or things from surveys and things like this. So what I would do is I would put all my big questions in one column on an Excel spreadsheet, and then I would put in another column how I would answer that question. So I wasn't putting the breakout for that, but I'm going to tell you just directly how that is, just to save time. But essentially, it's all the different ways you can answer that question, and there might be many for that same question, and I'll give you some examples. And then what I would do is I would then recategorize it, which I'm going to come to. I'm going to tell you about it just yet. We know this. You don't build a business, you build people, and people build a business. And you would really hope that everyone else knows this, but somehow when they get higher and higher, not all CEOs remember this, and we have to remind them this. This is part of our job, actually. So it's just sometimes we need to convince those at the top that might just not be as connected to those on the ground that we are. So it's giving them the information. So as I say, we have to speak their language, and one of the ways to do that is through measurement. This is a Kirkpatrick medal, and it goes from 1 to 4, 1 at the top here. So there's a lot more you can do here, and it's less as it gets further. So reaction. A lot of us are used to doing reaction. How do you measure the reaction of a training course, for example? And you can come off you, or you can pop it in the chat box, that's fine. Yeah, it's like that, isn't it? We used to use the NPS score, the Net Promoter Score, at the end of the feedback, because it was like one number. So when you were doing your analysis, you could see across the board, this particular training is between 70 and 90%. That's a really high NPS. And you can also set your KPIs for that as well. Obviously, it's more complex than that. There's more factors affecting it, but that's what you would look at in your report. You know, and you might say, why is this training only looking at 25% NPS result? That's no good. Why? And then you investigate, and that's part of doing your report. So it's all good to know that people enjoyed the content and the training, but did they learn? So you kind of touched on that, George, and what you just said there. You know, what did you take away from it? So like it said in the video, a test. Sharing your summary. So, a good way to show that you've learned is to go back to your team and go, hey, I learned this today. And it helps to just reinforce that in your head. Again, that's fine, but what's the point? Where behaviours change. So imagine that you're trying to change the mindset of a manager here. They've gone through it, they understand it, intellectually they grasp it, but has their behaviour changed? And how do you even measure behaviour? And finally, the results, because ultimately, why is L&D here? It has to have a purpose. What is our personal ROI? And that's a lot of the reasons why training departments are the first to go in organisations as well. So we need to make the data tell a story. That needs to lead to our suggestions. And then therefore we get the buy-in to do what we want to do. And that could be, we need a new member of staff to support this. Or, we really need to develop this leadership program like this. But if it's just on a hunch, it's not likely to get approval, because everything costs money. So you're looking at things from, if you're looking at the big questions and how you answer them, as you said, feedback, interview, it's the 360s that you do with your performance management, it's your HR surveys, it's your LMS system. You can get it from so many places, and it then becomes like you're a private investigator, and you're going, right, I've got all this information on my notice board. What does it all mean? And it's almost like doing a hypothesis. It's kind of like, in a way, influencing the data to what you already kind of know you need to be doing. But one thing to keep in mind is that it's not always what you think it is. So when we did a report one time, so we're not going to do this right now. We did a report one time, and it showed that there were 60% of our staff were what we call G1, which was individual leaders. So they weren't managers. 60% of them, they didn't have a training course specifically for them to help with their career development. And that was huge. The impact on the business, the turnover, employee engagement, presenteeism, absenteeism, these are all metrics, right? So we then decided, we showed this and the impact to the CEO to say, we need to design a course for these guys. And it was, of course, a massive yes. So some of the questions you might ask, I've got some examples here. What is the boss's main drive, and how can we align? So for that, what I would do is I'd look at any announcement videos, I'd take on any presentations on onboarding, I'd look at things with meetings where I've made notes, I'd look at company vision and strategy, and I would tie that into the department's KPIs and initiatives. And if I'm presenting an idea, I'd want to make sure that I'm bringing that in. Another question, what is the most proactive learning department? You might get this from your LMS system if it's robust. And if it's not currently capturing things like that, how can you change the system to make sure it does? So if your questions are not being answered, you either have to make changes or you need to go out and do it. So for example, right, we need to put a focus group together, or right, we just need to do an ad hoc survey super quick. We need to get this information from somewhere if it's not available in the system. So there's some examples there. So what I would do with my spreadsheet from here is I would have this whole list of maybe questions. Then I would categorize them. What kind of question? Once I got that, I would kind of copy it into another one and recategorize it by type of model that I was going to capture it in. So let's say, for example, LMS system, HR survey, 360. I'd label them all like that, so that if I did a HR survey, I would know that everything's being captured. And if it isn't captured on that HR survey, we need to get those questions in there. So you're not having to duplicate work, and your employees are not having to duplicate surveys, answering surveys, because we all know how difficult that is to get people to do. So what you're looking at then is the finished product. It's basically like, it has to be convincing, a no-brainer. It must speak their language. It must have the data and the implications. Very quick visuals, like a snapshot. Appendices should be in there, but for evidence only. So if they say, well, where have you got this from? You'll be like, I'll show you where I got it from. I got it from here. And this is the data to prove it. But you don't want to show them all that unless they ask, because of time. They've got time constraints, haven't they? Your physical end product will look very different from company to company. Some might do it in a PDF format, some might do it in a presentation. But either way, you need to be there in person if possible. That is the key. We'll come on to that. So it might just mean that you need to influence your leader first, so understand their pain points, and it can help you with the final presentation because they will pick out bits that don't make sense. So you're looking at two parts of this report or presentation: the status, and again, I won't go into too much detail here because it's a whole other session, but B is what are we going to do about it. So your A is essentially the history and the story building, and your B is your plan based on that. So it doesn't have to cover all this in the A, but it might cover things like the vision, as I just mentioned, or the HR heads or heads of department. Your bigger why does it fit into it all anyway? So they can see that your ROI is important and you recognise that. Then maybe a bit of background, what you've done so far, what the progress has been done, what's the data revealed so far, what went well, what didn't, and what was a surprise, like the G1 training. So you need to get the data to prove what you're saying. Now, what we want now is the solutions to that. So the plan. And the ask, let's say, because it's not just a plan. You're asking for something, you're asking for buy-in, you're asking for approval. So what you want is a high-level direction, which will link to the story. And that will then link to your key initiatives, why you've done that. And then the details of the action plan. So you also need to go as far as saying, you might not even show it might be in the appendices. You need to go as far as showing who's going to do it, when's it going to happen, what are the costs, what are the other metrics involved in this? Because it might sound amazing, but if you've not gone as far as saying, well, actually, this is how I envision it. By March, I'll have done this. By April, realistically. By October, we launch. We'll feedback by November, so on. Okay. So the most important thing then is the ask. So usually on the last page of this is, because of all of this, because of what happened and where we are, we have a plan for this. What I now need from you is 1, 2, and 3. Make it really, really clear. Try and get the approval right there and then. Make it such a no-brainer that it's like, well, yeah, of course you need an extra member of staff. Whatever it is that you're going for, bullet points and so on. It could be a culture shift. It could be an idea for a new program. So I've gone through that a little faster than expected, but I just want to finish on this bit, which I think is really important, and it's obviously something really important to me, and I think it's important in anything that we do, is mindset. So considering all this stuff is obviously you need passion, you need tenacity, you need energy. So it's something that can make massive changes in your organisation. So again, mindset is a whole other subject, but you have to get them to want to listen to what you've got to say. Build relationships, get your manager to push to, let them see the implications. And one of my phrases here is believe, know, and do. It's something that I used to train my managers on. So it's just something I came up with myself, really. You've got to believe it yourself. You've got to feel that passion, and if you don't know what that is, if you don't have the, if you've not got an intuition about what needs to be changed, we need to be curious, at least, that there's something that does need to be changed, but we don't know what yet. That drives 50% of everything. Then knowing is get the information, get the data, upskill yourself, whatever you need to be able to do it. And then do. So taking action despite any fear or time is actually do something. And remember here, when you do get the opportunity, let's say when you do, not if you do, when you do get the opportunity, be confident, try not to waffle. If you've done insights, discovery, approach it with a red, blue energy. So it's detailed, short detail, direct. Even a little bit of well-placed humour can help. We're all people, aren't we? And sometimes CEOs and upper management are constantly bombarded with things like this. And practice. So get to know your stuff really well. Think of it like Dragon's Den, if they ask you a question, you don't know the answer, they're not going to have confidence that you can execute this. So what we went through was the overview L&D 70-20-10 application. We looked at a lot. We looked at a little bit of data, reporting, top management, and mindset. I appreciate your time, and we're pretty much just on over the hour. But I hope that at the very least I leave you here feeling motivated and ready to influence. Let me know how you feel. I'd like to, as you're doing that, I'd like to just end with this quote: "Challenges are what makes life interesting, and overcoming them is what makes life meaningful." If there's any extra questions, please feel free to drop them in. I'd love to hear how you felt, if it was useful. Thank you so much for your interaction as well. You can screen grab that if you want to stay in touch. And as I say, if there's any extra questions, I'll reach out to you and just give you a little bit more information if you would like it. So I'm Nick Wagstaff from Inspire Away. I specialise in leadership and team dynamics, improving employee engagement. These are the 3 things I do: general CPD, team conflict intervention, retreat, and away days. I'd like to thank you again. And I just want to finish with one thing. If we have time, it's already pre-prepared, so just bear with me. Here. If you do have a second, let's do level 1. Level 1, Kirkpatrick. Has it come through? Yes. Please, it's anonymous. Please let me know how you felt about today, and if you'd like anything else similar. And I've got time, so those of you that want to need to go, please feel free. If you want to hang about for a bit longer, I'm here for you.